When we think about the concept of starting over, we often imagine it as a clean break, a sudden movement from one life to another that leaves the old self behind like a discarded coat. We tell ourselves that if we just change our zip code or our job, the ghosts of our past will stay behind, locked in a city we no longer visit. But for Laura Landon, the protagonist of Ann Bannon's novel I Am a Woman, moving from Chicago to New York City isn't a clean break at all. It is a messy, complicated attempt to outrun a shadow that is stitched into her very identity. Laura is the daughter of Merrill Landon, a man of immense power and even greater emotional control. He is a journalist, a man used to shaping narratives and commanding attention on a professional scale. And he has spent Laura's entire life shaping her as well. In the Landon household, love was not a gift, but a tool for leverage. To escape the suffocating weight of his expectations and the heavy grief that seems to hang over her family like a shroud, Laura makes the leap to New York. She wants to be a person who stands on her own feet, independent and unobserved, far away from the reach of her father's influence. She finds a modest start, taking a job as a secretary for a Dr. Hollingsworth, and moves into a cramped apartment with a woman named Marcie. Marcie is everything. The stifling atmosphere of Laura's childhood was not. She is vibrant, charismatic, and lives a life of high-velocity emotion. She doesn't just exist in a space, she consumes it. Marcie shares her apartment with her volatile ex-husband, Burr, and their domestic life is a constant, exhausting cycle of explosive passion and deep resentment. For Laura, living with them is like being pulled into a whirlpool. It is chaotic, loud, and often frightening, yet it is also the first time she's experiencing life on her own terms, even if those terms are currently defined by the turbulence of others. In the wreckage of Marcie and Burr's relationship, Laura finds a strange kind of freedom, the freedom of being a witness to a life that is unapologetically messy. As Laura settles into this new, frantic rhythm, something she has spent years suppressing begins to surface. She realizes with a clarity that is both terrifying and liberating that she is intensely attracted to women. This isn't just a passing curiosity or a reaction to her new environment, it is a resurgence of a repressed identity that she had tried to bury long ago. This realization brings with it the ghost of Beth, a woman from Laura's past. Beth was a devastating, transformative love, a relationship that ended in a way that left Laura fractured. As Laura navigates her new life in the city, she finds herself unconsciously looking for the echoes of Beth in the women she meets, searching for a feeling she isn't sure she's allowed to have. This internal struggle is complicated by her friendship with Jack Man. Jack is a draftsman, a man who navigates the world with a sharp, cynical wit that acts as both a weapon and a shield. He becomes a sort of mentor to Laura, though his guidance is often delivered with a layer of protective irony. Jack sees the world for what it is, a series of social performances, and he warns Laura that she is playing a dangerous game. He specifically warns her about Marcie. Jack observes that Marcie is a woman who lives for the thrill of the moment and the validation of others, and he suspects that Marcie's interest in Laura isn't born of genuine affection, but is instead a form of social experimentation. He tells Laura that Marcie is likely straight, and that she is simply using Laura's infatuation to pass the time or to add a bit of spice to her own chaotic life. Despite these warnings, Laura is unable to pull herself away. She becomes increasingly obsessed with Marcie, caught in a loop of hope and heartbreak, interpreting every smile or touch as a sign of shared longing. During this time, she begins to move in different social circles, eventually encountering Bebo Brinker. Bebo is a woman who exists in the heart of the Greenwich Village. Queer scene, she is bold, assertive, and unapologetically herself. Unlike the complicated, shifting dynamics Laura has been navigating with Marcie, Bebo offers a different kind of presence. She is a real person, living a real life, even if that life is one that society at the time viewed with suspicion or outright hostility. Bebo represents a possibility of authenticity that Laura has never known, but she is also a mirror that reflects Laura's own uncertainty. The tension in Laura's life eventually reaches a breaking point, and it comes from the one person she thought she could eventually find a connection with, Marcie. Marcie senses the depth of Laura's feelings, and instead of offering comfort or clarity, she reveals a devastating truth. She has known about Laura's orientation for months. She admits that she hasn't been experiencing a romance, but has been playing a game, In a moment of staggering cruelty, she reveals that she even went so far as to bet Burr that she could provoke a romantic pass from Laura. This betrayal is more than just a heartbreak, it is a shattering of Laura's sense of reality. The woman she thought was her connection to a new way of living was actually just another performer in a social drama, and Laura was the unwitting prop. Devastated and feeling utterly exposed, Laura's psychological state begins to fracture. In a desperate, perhaps even subconscious, attempt to reclaim some sense of her original self, the daughter who belonged to the powerful Merrill Landon, she seeks him out. It is a regression born of trauma. When her new world collapses, she returns to the only other structure she has ever known, even if that structure was a prison. She goes to her father, hoping to find some kind of footing, but the encounter is far from restorative. In a final, explosive confrontation at the Mackleton Hotel, Laura attempts to claim her autonomy by revealing her sexuality to him. She wants him to see her as she truly is, believing that the truth will finally break the hold he has over her. But Merrill is a man broken by his own repressed grief over the deaths of Laura's mother and brother. In this moment of high tension, his grief turns into something dark and unstable. He makes a gesture toward her that is predatory and suffocating, a desperate, twisted attempt to exert control in a world that is slipping away from him. Horrified by the man her father has become and the realization that he can never truly see her, Laura strikes him with an ashtray and flees into the night. Following this violent rupture, Laura is left in a state of total emotional collapse. She has lost her roommate, her sense of stability, and her image of her father. She is adrift in a city that suddenly feels cold and indifferent. It is in this wreckage that Jackman steps in again. He offers her a clinical, almost detached analysis of her behavior, acting as the voice of harsh reality. He suggests that Laura hasn't really been looking for Marcie, or even for a new life. He argues that she has been chasing the ghost of Beth. According to Jack, every woman Laura has pursued was merely a reconstruction of that lost, idealized past love. It is a harsh truth to swallow, the idea that her search for identity has actually been a search for a memory. But this realization, as painful as it is, becomes the catalyst for her actual transformation. Laura realizes she can no longer live in the shadow of her father, nor can she live in the delusion of her feelings for Marcie. She understands now that you cannot build a future if you are only trying to recreate a past that is already gone. She has to face the reality of who she is in the present, not who she was in the past. She decides to stop chasing ghosts and start looking for something tangible. She goes to the Cellar, a lesbian bar, to find Bebo Brinker. This isn't a romanticized cinematic meeting, it is tense and difficult. Bebo, who has been hardened by her own experiences in the queer community and her own history of unrequited love, tests Laura's resolve. She isn't looking for someone who is just passing through or someone who is having a crisis of identity. She is looking for someone who is actually there, someone who is ready to exist in the world as they are. In the end, the resolution doesn't come from a grand, sweeping gesture, but from a moment of quiet honesty. Under a street lamp, Laura finally drops her defenses. She confesses her love to Bebo, not as a reaction to a trauma or a search for a ghost, but as an expression of her current, authentic self. Bebo accepts her. As they walk away together into the night, Laura is finally moving toward a life that is actually hers. When we look back at the structure of the story, we see a profound exploration of the difference between performance and authenticity. Much of the book is occupied by characters who are performing roles to survive. Marcie performs the role of the liberated, experimental woman to avoid real intimacy. Jack performs the role of the cynical observer to hide his own vulnerabilities and financial insecurities. Merrill performs the role of the powerful patriarch to mask his internal collapse. Even Laura spends much of the novel performing the role of the daughter or the misunderstood lover. The tragedy of the book lies in the realization that these performances are often used as shields. They protect the characters from the pain of being truly known, but they also prevent them from being truly loved. The theme of chasing ghosts is perhaps the most resonant part of the narrative. It suggests that we often approach our relationships not as they are, but as we need them to be to satisfy our unhealed wounds. Laura's journey is the process of stopping that chase. She has to move from the psychological weight of her family's history and her past loves into the immediate, sometimes difficult, but ultimately grounding reality of the present. It is a story about the courage required to be seen, not as a daughter, not as a victim, and not as a shadow of someone else, but as a woman who is simply, undeniably, herself. Through Laura's eyes, we see that identity isn't something you find by looking backward. It is something you claim by walking forward, even when you aren't entirely sure where the path leads.